Well, welcome. I'm going to be going through the Issl standards, Iowa Standards for School Leaders. Talk a little bit about my interpretation and view of them, and also my experience with them, and how I've grown in my ability to lead through all 6 standards. So the first one was visionary leadership, and I had that in the center of all 3 because I do believe it is the center of all 3. Having a clear mission and vision of where you're going will impact all of the other areas and how you're leading, and also gives the reason why behind what you're doing. So as a principal, looking at facilitating the development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship of a vision of learning that is shared and supported by the school community. Last year, I read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and I thought it was just a phenomenal tie-in to visionary leadership, really looking at the why behind what we're doing, especially as a school. Now, this book is more focused on business leaders and businesses, and they look at different business models, and they have found the ones that are more successful have a real strong grasp on why they're doing what they're doing, as opposed to what they're producing, what they're serving, what they're making, or who they're serving, who their customer is. Those are important things, but if you have a strong, central, grounded focus on why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to be far more successful in the long run. And the same is true for schools. With that vision, it's important to have a school vision, but it's also important to have a personal vision on what your goal is as an educator and as a leader. My goal and my vision on education, I always have one, but it has changed a little bit the more I research and the more I've learned. Right now, this quote by Francis Scott Key really aligns with what my mission is in terms of education, which education is to give strength and preparation for the whole life. It is then that habits, principles, and tastes that fix the color of succeeding years are to be formed. Then are the victories to be achieved over the temper and disposition, over the temptations from within and from without, that make man master of himself through life. To me, this takes education just to a much deeper level. Patience in investigation, accuracy of research, perseverance in labor, resolution to conquer difficulty, zeal in the cause of learning and virtue are then to be acquired. Then is science to display her charms, and literature her delights, and a refined exalted taste to lure him by high gratifications from the vain pleasures of the world. Then is he to be made familiar with the sages and heroes of antiquity or history, to catch the inspiration of their genius and their virtue, and the great and good of every age and of every land are to be made his associates, his instructors, his examples. I found this quote and I loved it. It takes that purpose and the what of education, and it gives the why behind it. So, as an educational leader, development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship. I have experience in these. In development, I was blessed to be at the school when a new principal joined us, and we did not have a school mission, and she guided us through the development of a school mission. So on that end of things, I was a teacher around the table, partaking in articulating what our mission would be, developing it together, making sure everyone was on the same page with that, and that was a great experience to be in. At the time, I understood what she was doing, but not at the level I understand it now. Now I understand why that was so important that we did that. In my role as a school administrative manager, I had many opportunities to practice articulating our school's mission. I did this every time we had to hire someone new. So with every interview, I would articulate our mission. I would ask the person what their personal mission was, because we wanted to make sure that they aligned and that they believed in our school's mission. Every time we had new parents who were debating about sending their child to a school, new parents or other districts that were sending their student to our school, I had to articulate our mission to them so they were very clear of what our purpose was and what their child would be receiving from an education within our school. Anytime I was in an IEP meeting or in a staff meeting, again, I was articulating the mission, bringing everything that we were doing back to the mission of the school and how we were achieving it. Implementation. This was important as well. I assessed our school's implementation, staff's individual implementation of the mission, and then I would respond by tailoring and providing professional development around the needs to improve our mission and to make sure people were doing our mission. In my role as a SAM, I was the supervisor of the para-educators and the support staff, and so that was something that was extremely important on that end, ensuring that everyone believed in and that their decisions and choices and the day-to-day activities were all helping our mission become achieved. And stewardship. being responsible that the mission is achieved. As a school administrative manager, my principal and I were responsible that this mission and that our school's mission was constantly being worked at, being achieved. Not only were we responsible and that I felt that responsibility, but I also worked at ensuring that every individual in the building also felt that responsibility, because the mission is only achieved when every single person believes in it. Visionary leadership, I think, is central to all leadership, and we must always come back to the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Instructional leadership. This is advocating, nurturing, sustaining a school culture and instructional program conducive to student learning and staff professional development. So, I'm a believer in continuous improvement. And my husband and I often get in these arguments where I'm like, oh my gosh, we so need to be reading more to our kids. Oh no, our bedtime schedule needs to be stricter. They need to get a good night's sleep. Hey, I have not been calling my grandma enough. And you know what, you should call your mom more often. Or let's sit and talk about a relationship and where we're at and how we can be better spouses to each other. And he just like rips his hair out and is like, oh my gosh, chill out. Everything's fine. Can't you just be happy and content? And I would say I can be happy, but I'm never really content. I'm a firm believer in continuous improvement. I'm a firm believer in always trying to be the best version of yourself and acknowledging I'll never get there. I can always be better. There's always something to be better at. I think as an instructional leader of a school, you need to have this belief in continuous improvement, and you need to role model it in your own personal work as a principal and as a leader, and you need to inspire the people around you to have this belief as well, and to acknowledge it and know that you can always be better. Two tools that I love. I love Marzano's work, The Art and Science of Teaching and How to Support the Art and Science of Teaching for Supervision. To me, these books just articulately break down what good teaching is. I can walk in a classroom and see a great teacher and say, wow, that's great teaching. But what does that mean? How do I articulate it to that teacher? How do I say, this is what you're doing and why it's good? So she's doing awesome. What would that mean? Oh, the teacher is asking questions that require elaborative inferences to go beyond what is explicitly taught. That's what she's doing that makes it so beautifully done. Same thing with the teacher who's not, or who's struggling in one area. You're like, something's a little off. Something could be improved. What is it? Oh, she needs to stop and engage students after she's giving that new information so they have that time to process what's going on. It just provides a nice framework that even the best teachers can find areas in there where they're like, oh, I could improve upon that. Oh, I could improve upon that. Because sometimes that's difficult when you've got really great teachers. How do they continue to improve? There's always something to continuously improve upon. Organizational leadership. This is one of my favorites too. As a school administrative manager, this was my job. My job was organizational leadership in order to allow my principal to focus more on instructional leadership. So I became extremely familiar with this and received just an amazing amount of experience doing this type of leadership. Organizational leadership is ensuring the management of the organization, operations, and resources for a safe, efficient, and effective learning environment. And I love the words efficient and effective. I am a firm believer in efficiency and effectiveness, because why not? Why not be efficient and effective? I started my college education 2 years in a manufacturing engineering degree. And with that, I got a lot of experience or a lot of conversation and discussion around looking at manufacturing plants and making them more effective and efficient. So I took that with my knowledge of schools, and I take that kind of framework and that way of thinking to improve the efficiency and the management of schools. During my degree, we talked about Toyota in Japan, and they do a program, Lean Six Sigma. It's something a lot of manufacturing plants do, but they talk about Muda, Muri, and Mura, which are Japanese words, and that each are about waste and eliminating waste to be more efficient and effective, and I think the same applies for schools. So when you're looking at Muda, non-value adding activities. So when I'm managing a school, I'm looking, where are the non-value adding activities, and how can I either bring value to them or eliminate them? You know, things like, we're just gonna color for 10 minutes. That's non-value adding. Either bring some value to it, or let's find a way to eliminate it. Same thing with 10 different classes of students of 20 standing in line waiting to get their lunch. Non-value adding, that's waste. How do we eliminate it, or how do we bring value to that time? Same thing with worry, overburden. I think this is extremely ties into schools and to teachers. How do we eliminate the overburden feelings that teachers have by the amount of work that's put on their plates? So really looking at and distinguishing what they're asked to do and making sure it's meaningful. From my experience in consulting in other schools, I'm seeing a lot of unnecessary documentation and data collection for data and documentation that's not being used. If it's not used, why are we doing it? That is overburden on the teachers. Take that away. If it's used, then let's do it. But there's certainly things that we need to look at to lessen the load. Mura, imbalance, unevenness, irregular. So the balance of work that's being asked of people. When I think of this, I didn't even realize that, but with a little triangle right there, I think of response to intervention. So you're looking at your tier 1 instruction, and that is for all students, but typically 80 to 85% of the students learn from that instruction. The ones that don't need that tier 2 instruction or that tier 3 instruction. Where's the burden? Sometimes if that tier 2 and tier 3 instruction is not effective, then that burden is on tier 1 to make sure that the students are learning. If that tier 1 instruction is not effective, then boom, that burden is on tier 2 and tier 3 instructional teachers. And so really looking at, is it balanced? Is the work balanced? Is the expectations balanced? And do things need to be fixed, coached, taught, adjusted to ensure balance? Collaborative leadership. So, you know, back when I was 18, and my parents remind me of this often, I knew everything, and I was the smartest person, and I knew the right answers, and there's no need to talk to anyone about it because I knew what was right. How funny that is as you grow older, and even now, even in the last month, I can think of experiences where it's like, oh yeah, I don't know all that. Oh yes, getting more information is better. There's no doubt that bringing multiple minds together from multiple backgrounds with multiple expertise brings about better results. Collaborative leadership is collaborating with families and community members, responding to diverse community interests and needs, and mobilizing community resources.